Good morning, Chicago. I'm Dr. Allison Arwady, Commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health. As always, this is your chance to get your COVID questions answered. You can put them in the box below on Facebook. You can also use the hashtag AskDrArwady on Facebook or Twitter. I will note that I have recently joined Twitter. We are learning about this platform. I have to admit it's not one I'd used before, but if you want to follow me at Dr. Arwady, we are starting to put some things on there. So thanks to everybody who has been encouraging me to join that part of the social media platform. Today is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. And as always, let's start with a look at our COVID data. Reminder, chicago.gov/coronavirus is where you get for all things related to COVID in Chicago. You can get to the dashboard directly by going to chi.gov/COVID-. And if we take a look here, the news continues to look really good. Obviously, with some of the reopening that we did recently, we were feeling confident that we would continue to see improvements in cases and vaccinations, continue to see stable in terms of our hospitalizations and ICU, and that is in fact what we've seen. If you look here, our positivity as of today is at 4.1%. That is down from 4.5% a week ago. It is below the 5% of where we want to be, and really quite a bit better than we'd been in more than a month. So that is heading the right direction. And our testing numbers have stayed quite good. You see we're averaging more than 12,500 tests per day. That's down only 5% from a week ago, whereas in comparison, our cases are down to 435 per day. And that's down 15% from a week ago. So that's how you know the drop in cases is not just related to a drop off in testing. It is a true decrease in terms of our number of cases. And so 435 per day compared to 510 a week ago is very good progress. You know we want to get under 400 cases per day, and ideally under 200 cases per day. But every day we continue to make progress, and certainly things are heading the right direction here, which is good to see. And as we're looking ahead later this week toward likely some more reopening, things are looking very promising. So that's all good news. Why don't we also pull up, for people who are not as used to looking at the vaccine data, under vaccine here, under data, if we look at data at a glance, this is where every day we update and you can see what the numbers are looking like. So across all Chicago residents, you can see just over 47% of the population has gotten at least one dose, and about 35% have a completed vaccine series. If we limit it to those 18 plus, about 59% of Chicagoans have gotten at least a first dose, and about 44% have a completed vaccine series. Among those over 65, we're at basically 68% now have gotten a first dose, and 58% have a completed vaccine series. And then if you look by race ethnicity, you see the whole city is at about 47% have gotten a first dose, but they're above that average. White Chicagoans, almost 54% have gotten a first dose, and 52% of Asian Chicagoans have gotten a first dose, whereas in contrast, about 38% of Latinx folks and about 31% of Black Chicagoans have gotten a first dose. So we still have a ways to go in terms of some of that race equity related to vaccine work. I do want to highlight that these numbers, both in terms of the overall coverage number and actually both the Black and Latinx coverage, are leading where you look across, I think, the 9 largest U.S. cities by population. And at the end of each week, we look at that and we trade notes. We're still lagging on 65 plus. The fact that only about 68% have gotten a first dose is not where we want to be. We really, we want that number over 70% at a minimum. I'd love to see it over 75 or even over 80%. And so if you know anybody over 65, please reach out to them, because that remains by far the group with the highest risk for severe outcomes for cases and death. For hospitalizations and death. You can also look here to see what our numbers are looking like. You see we're averaging, more than 15,000 doses of vaccine in Chicago every day, which is good, but you can see it's down quite a bit. We were doing more than 30,000 a month ago, and so over the last month, we've seen that drop, and we're doing about half as many as we were. Still a lot of people getting vaccinated, but some of that demand has definitely softened, similar to what we've seen around the country. And you can look here on the left, this is showing by race ethnicity the first dose, and on the right by age. And you can see that red is white Chicagoans, green is Asian, blue is Latinx, purple is black. Those are our major race ethnicity groups here. And all of them are continuing to uptrend, which is good news. But we'd like to see especially these lower lines come up further, because those are the groups by race ethnicity that have been hit the hardest by COVID, and they are where we are continuing to see the most cases, as well as hospitalizations and deaths. And then this is for the breakdown of those who have completed the vaccine series, and you can explore this some more. You see that we have this goal of getting 95% of our vaccine out, and we're at 92% of that now. You can see what this shows is going all the way back to the beginning here. The black is the number of doses that were allocated to Chicago, and the red is those that were distributed. And you can see, you know, it looks like this jagged line, because every week we would get once a week it comes to Chicago, we get it distributed. Once a week it comes. And so you can see really every single week here, up until about this last month, we were getting, you know, more than 95%, you know, often 98, 99% out. And then again, just in the setting of a little bit of this softening demand, you see this start to fall off a little bit. So still, you know, we've been allocated about 2.5 million doses. We've distributed about 2.3 million. We've actually administered here something like 2.1 million. So we're doing well, but you do see some of that starting to fall off. And then similarly, where we look at administration, so our goal is not just to get it out the door, but then to have it reported within a week into arms. We're doing well here too. We had set a goal of 85%. You can see going back to December, you know, that's a very aggressive goal, and we'd hit it week after week after week. Again, the blue is what's been delivered, and then the green is what's been administered. But then you can see, you know, about a month ago, we start to see some of that fall off. And so we're at a point now where 84% of the doses have been administered and reported within a week, which is still very good from an efficiency standpoint, but you do get a sense that we're working harder for all of the vaccine doses that are going into arms at this point. Not a problem. Most people who have not gotten a vaccine in Chicago at this point, it's not that they've said, I'll never get a vaccine, it's that it hasn't maybe been a top priority for them. And as we've been doing more of this work to really bring vaccine into neighborhoods, continue to work with providers, which of course has been central to our strategy all along, be working with a lot of other trusted partners. Every single day we're getting plenty more vaccine into arms and making progress, but you do get a sense that some of that demand has softened. And you know, my worry is that we want to get past COVID as a city, and where we are seeing lower vaccination rates in Chicago, it's also where we're seeing higher case rates. And so the vaccine is clearly working very well to protect people, to protect communities, and I just hope that we will be able to see that good vaccine uptake really across all of Chicago, and that remains a priority and broadly going well. So I encourage you to explore that if you like. There's a lot more data that you can look at and download yourself, but that's where we keep some of this. All right, let's go ahead and turn to some questions. All right. Oh, questions about kids. No surprise. So Chai Kiki K is saying, when can I sign up my 13-year-old for a vaccine? Yesterday, the FDA gave the authorization for Pfizer's emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine to be extended to 12 to 15-year-olds. There's still one more step, though. Tomorrow, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices for the CDC, or the ACIP it's called. Tomorrow, that group is meeting. As always, it is a public meeting, and you're welcome to follow along online. We certainly will be. And the scientists look at all of the data, and they actually just make the recommendation for how to give this vaccine. So, for example, they will add it most likely to the list of approved, authorized vaccines for this age. They will probably make some recommendations about how this vaccine needs to be spaced or not spaced compared to other childhood vaccinations. And then once the ACIP has given the go-ahead, which we fully expect, and the CDC signs off, that will likely happen tomorrow afternoon. At that point, all of the agreements that the providers sign across the country say they'll follow the ACIP guidance. So we are already set up to start being able to vaccinate children 12 years and older starting Thursday. But you can go ahead and start signing up for appointments now if you want. So here in Chicago, ZocDoc.com/vaccine. I know early this morning they were still working on the scripts a little bit to make it clear that even though you're not eligible for a vaccine yet, you are eligible to sign up. Those are working fine, so you can go on ZocDoc and you can make an appointment for your child beginning Thursday. Also, you can call the hotline, 312-746-4835. That is our number for everybody always. It's staffed 7 days a week. There are folks there who will talk to you. Where do you live? What are your needs? What's near you? Can they get you set up? And they can also help you make an appointment in advance. All of the city of Chicago pods, are points of dispensing across the whole city that have Pfizer, which is all of them, will be open to children over 12. You do have to have a parent or guardian present at this point to be able to get that vaccine. So obviously, we're working to make sure there's availability on Saturdays and Sundays, recognizing that kids have school and parents are working and trying to have some flexibility there. We also have worked with the pharmacies, all of the pharmacy chains here in Chicago, and the great majority of the independent pharmacies, if not all, will also be offering vaccine all the way down to age 12, also starting on Thursday. So I know we're getting a list up on our website of those pharmacies. If it's not up already, it will be soon. But know that your pharmacy near you would be another place where you can bring your child. And then finally, we've been working with pediatricians' offices as well as schools, school-based health centers. We'll be out this Saturday. We're working in conjunction with Chicago Public Schools and CTU. We'll have the vaccine bus at likely 5 different high schools around Chicago. Details to come there. I know they're working on wanting to make sure everything is fully aligned in terms of that messaging, but we'll be there. And those are not just open. All of these are not just open to children, to be very clear. You can come, you can bring your 12-year-old plus, but you can also bring yourself, you can bring your family members, you can bring your great aunt, you can bring your neighbor. At all points, these remain open for children. We are maintaining walk-in capability at all of the City of Chicago sites. That's not going away just because vaccine is becoming eligible for younger children. However, I would encourage you to make an appointment, because that way you won't have to wait as much. There will be vaccine available for you. I think it's likely in the first few days, in particular, of vaccine availability, we probably will see a pretty big flood of people looking for vaccine. And so I would encourage you to make an appointment first. Peggy Henderson on Facebook: is the dosage of vaccine for children the same for adults? And if so, please give the rationale. Yeah, really good question. So the dosage of the Pfizer vaccine for the 12 to 15-year-olds is the same. And this is one of the things, let's actually take a step back and talk a little bit about that trial. One of the main things that they're looking at in kids is, do you need to adjust the dosing? And so they have been looking at different dosing levels. And the way you can understand is a dose a good amount is, first of all, is the right amount of protection coming, and are you seeing side effects in a way that you would not expect? And the good news from this Pfizer data, and again, just a quick reminder, Pfizer at this point is the only vaccine approved for 12 to 17-year-olds. All of the other, the Moderna and the J&J, are only authorized for people 18 and older. I expect Moderna quite soon will go through the same process, because they've submitted their early data, and so FDA will likely give approval for younger kids. But right now, we're only talking about Pfizer for 12 to 17-year-olds. And what they found when they did the trial, it was done in a few thousand kids, volunteers always across the U.S. here, and just like they did for the adults, they separate the volunteers, and obviously it's done with parental consent. They separate the volunteers into two groups. Everybody gets an injection, but half the group gets the real vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and half the group gets a dummy vaccine, like just saline. And then they follow the groups forward. They encourage them to continue wearing their mask, continue doing everything that they would be doing to protect themselves against COVID, and they follow them for side effects, they follow them for any severe outcomes, and then they follow them to see, do they get COVID, do they get seriously ill? And what they found, first of all, in the study was that there were no safety concerns, first and foremost. No unexpected side effects, not having worse problems with side effects, and that the vaccine was effective in terms of when they checked the blood, the level of protection, meaning the antibodies that come from the vaccine, were as good or, in fact, even better than what they had seen in the young adults. And that the same dosing that they were using for adults was appropriate for those adolescents. And then when they looked for efficacy, they looked, you were able to see the antibody levels, but also in the real world, 16 of the teenagers in the dummy arm, the arm that just got the injection without getting the real vaccine, got COVID, compared with 0 in the arm that had gotten the real vaccine. So it also showed that it was protective in the real world, not just in the laboratory. So really about as good as we see when it comes to one of these randomized controlled trials. For children, the standards for safety are extremely high, and so did not see concerns related to safety, and then the efficacy was just as good. There are studies going on right now for younger children, and in fact, Pfizer has indicated that they expect possibly by September there may be a different, that they may be able to put forward the request for authorization for children as young as 2. We may see different dosing for those younger children. I don't know. Again, they're studying different doses, seeing what may be needed. But for the adolescents, it's the same dose, and that's good because that helps a lot in terms of being able to not have confusion, being able to make sure that it's widely available. Erica Allison on Facebook. Okay, again, asking about Pfizer and the 12 to 15-year-olds. Will there be any prioritization among that age group? Will those with medical needs be prioritized? And I'm happy to say there will not be prioritization among that age group because we have enough vaccine. Compared to where you're thinking back to phase 1A and 1B, and it was so limited the amount of vaccine that we had, we needed to do a lot of prioritization. Here in Chicago, broadly, we have enough Pfizer vaccine for all the 12 to 15-year-olds, or we will over the next few days. And so any child is eligible right away, and we have been working to make sure we're ready in terms of having enough vaccine. So again, I encourage you to make an appointment through your pediatrician or provider's office, through your pharmacy, through ZocDoc. You can go to chicago.gov/vaccine. chi.gov/vaccine if you want to see all the locations that are available. But do make that appointment, and we anticipate there being enough vaccine for everybody. Good question. Alexandria Dean on Facebook. Is the India COVID variant here? Any indication of how the vaccines might protect against this one and what makes it different from the others? So there's a lot in that question. So the way variants are detected is that, all over the world, there are thousands of scientists and laboratories that are testing COVID virus and doing genetic sequencing, meaning taking the genetic fingerprint of that virus. This is different than human sequencing. They are not taking human DNA. They are taking the genetic material for the virus, and then they are looking to see, does this genetic material for the virus have any changes, any mutations in it? And whenever they do that sequencing, meaning they get the genetic fingerprint, all over the world, it gets uploaded to one database. This has been a big public health agreement across really all the countries, and it means that all the scientists around the world are able to see how is the COVID virus changing? Where are we seeing mutations? Where are we seeing variants emerge? The great majority of the time when we see variants, they don't cause trouble. Many times you can have a single base pair change and it won't even change the protein. It doesn't change the way it behaves in the body. Most of the time we don't worry about it. But when we start to see a variant emerge somewhere that suggests either it's more infectious, more contagious, it makes people sicker, it means that one of the medications might not work as well, or importantly, one of the vaccines might not work as well, it then gets labeled a variant of concern, or a VOC. And a variant of concern means that it's been detected enough times and we have some epidemiologic data that suggests this change, this variant, is one that we should be more concerned about and we need to pay more attention to. And so we have detected, here in Chicago, there's been about 5 major variants of concern that have been detected, VOCs. So there was the one from the UK, B117, originally detected in the UK. There was the one originally detected in Brazil. There was the one originally detected in South Africa. So just recently, they have named one of the variants that's been emerging in India a variant of concern. And I think our team here in Chicago is now looking back. Do we have we detected that variant before? What I can tell you, though, is we have detected all of the other variants of concern here, all 5 of them. And then there's a couple different layers of, we also detect ones that are not fully labeled as a variant of concern, but we're keeping our eye on, right? There's been a variant that emerged in California. There was one that emerged in New York. They're not all dangerous, but they give us a sense of how the COVID virus is mutating. And then importantly, when we detect one that is labeled a variant of concern, all the vaccine manufacturers around the whole world get to work, if they weren't at work already, on testing their vaccines against those variants of concern. And the good news is at this point, all 3 of the vaccines that we are using here in Chicago, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson, remain protective against all of the known variants of concern. And that is also true for this new one emerging from India, as far as I know at this point. Certainly the team is learning more about it. We'll update as needed. But there has not been a sign at this point that there is a variant that has managed to completely evade the vaccine, especially the 3 vaccines we're using here. What we do see, though, is that the vaccines can lose some of their effectiveness against some of the variants. So like that UK one, that's the one we have the most of here in Illinois, here in Chicago, across the US. It's the one that's more contagious. But the good news is the vaccines work absolutely as well as they do against the original COVID. There's no problem there. Whereas some of the other ones, like the one originally detected in South Africa, the one originally detected in Brazil, you do lose a little bit of that protection, but it's still very protective. So maybe, those Pfizer and Moderna, they're 95% protective in the trials. Maybe you're dropping to more like 70 to 80% protective, but still very protective. And so the vaccines at this point, again, are protecting against all the known variants, really including the one in India, and getting folks vaccinated now is critical because that doesn't give the new variants a chance to take hold as much here in Chicago or across the US. What's happening in India is they just don't have enough vaccine. So only, much less than 10% of the population in India, unfortunately, has been able to be vaccinated. And so you're seeing these horrible stories. Like, it's a terrible outbreak. They, overwhelm the healthcare system in a lot of spaces, not having enough oxygen, not having enough ability to treat folks. It's not because the vaccine isn't working, it's because there's not enough vaccine. And so this is where really wanting to get the U.S. vaccinated quickly lets us free up vaccine, frankly, for the rest of the world, because we've got to get vaccine across the whole world. Less than 5% of the world is fully vaccinated against COVID at this point, even though there have been more than 1.3 billion COVID vaccines administered. It's, this amazing achievement on the one hand, but also countries, especially countries that are not as wealthy, have not had as much access to the vaccine. So that's really the main challenge that we're seeing, as opposed to the vaccine not working. Good question. All right, Rebecca West on Facebook. I'm a nanny and I have been wearing a mask around the infant that I care for. Should I continue doing that even after I am fully vaccinated, i.e. after the 2-week period after my second shot? The rest of the family is fully vaccinated. Yeah, really good question. So first, thank you for being responsible for wearing your mask around that infant. Obviously, infants, for all of us, are going to be the group that is least likely to be vaccinated, even when vaccines become approved for younger children, and certainly taking care around anybody who's not able to be vaccinated. The youngest children in particular is important. I would certainly have that conversation with the family, but broadly speaking, if this is a family that, you are in the home generally, you're taking care broadly in other parts of your life, and if the other people around you in your family, for example, are vaccinated, the most important thing is that you yourself are fully vaccinated. I personally would be comfortable if I had a nanny or someone taking care of my child who was fully vaccinated 2 weeks post that second dose, taking care of the child without a mask on, assuming that you, of course, did not have symptoms or did not have other concerns, had not known that you were exposed to COVID. I think that's a conversation you'd want to have with the family. But, bottom line, you get vaccinated. It's the most important thing to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect the infants you care with. So I would, I would generally be in favor of that. But as always, you'd want to have the conversation with the family. I don't know the whole history, of course, of the situation. Jenna Martin on Facebook. Can my 4-year-old hang out indoors and unmasked with a group of fully vaccinated adults for a weekend getaway? The answer is yes. The CDC has said as long as all of the adults are fully vaccinated, there can be children, particularly if we're talking about one child here, we're not talking about pulling together a whole ton of unrelated children who can be around and unmasked. Getting all of the adults vaccinated, most important thing at this point, especially the youngest children, less likely to get COVID, less likely to get seriously ill if they did, and very unlikely in a setting of fully vaccinated adults for there to be a concern. So yes, you can do that. All right, let's get a sense of some other things here. Donna Scafidi Cameron on Facebook. I heard in the fall we might have to get a booster. Have you heard about this? Yes, I have heard a lot about this. And I want to be very clear that we don't know yet what is going to be needed for a booster. I actually don't think it's likely that we're going to need a booster as soon as this fall. And that's because, to bring us forward in this conversation about variants, all of these vaccines, all 3 of them, have continued to show very good protection. Not only are they safe, not only do they work against the variants, but the reason why earlier this week the Pfizer was able to submit to the FDA to move from emergency use authorization. They've now applied for that full biologic approval where it's no longer under emergency use authorization. Actually, we can talk about that if people have questions. The reason they were able to do that is predominantly because they now have more than 6 months of data for all of the people that they'd followed in their survey. And they found no safety problems and continued good protection for at least 6 months. And that was what the FDA was requiring. When it's going to take the FDA, I would guess a couple of months. I don't know for sure. Sometimes, prior to COVID, this process could take even a couple of years for them to give full approval for a vaccine or for a new drug because it involves a lot of work. They certainly look at all of the data, but they also are going and doing extra surveying of all of the places where they're making this vaccine or making this drug. There's a lot of things that they're checking and double checking. I know here they will put a lot of extra resources into doing this, but they're not going to skip any of the steps. And so I do anticipate it'll, if I had to take a guess, maybe 3 months is what we're hearing. But the sort of back to the original question, once you have that authorization, then let me just pull this back up here. Right. Then once you have the authorization, it means that the company can directly market to others, et cetera. So back to the question of boosters. Where we would need a booster is not because one of the 3 vaccines we have has lost how effective it is, most likely. It's more that we could see a new variant emerge that the vaccines are no longer protective against. And that could happen just in the next few months. So it's possible we could need a booster as soon as this fall. I think it's likely at some point we probably will need a booster, just given how much this is mutating around the world, et cetera. And the jury is still out onto whether this is something that we could need to get, even an annual dose of for a few years, but we just don't know. Bottom line right now is get the one that we have now. Don't wait for the fall. Don't say, should I get another one? We had a couple questions from people saying, I got the Moderna. Should I already be trying to get a Pfizer booster? Or I got the Pfizer. Should I get the J&J? No, you just need to get a full vaccination series right now, and all of the vaccine manufacturers have been working already on the technology. So if we need to get a booster, the good thing is we're fairly set up in terms of how to make those changes. But there's no plans at this point for a booster in the fall, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more. But keep your eye on those variants to really understand whether that's going to be necessary as opposed to whether the vaccines keep working. Lisa Balde Veneria on Facebook. Should you eat before getting your COVID shot? I would say yes. You are welcome to eat. You should drink something. Not that eating or drinking interferes with the COVID shot in any way, but there are some people who just at the sight of blood or a shot, they sometimes feel a little faint. That's not a side effect of the vaccine. But I always recommend that if someone's going to get their blood drawn or get a shot, that you should just eat a good breakfast or a good lunch. Make sure you've had plenty of water that day. That's really all you need to do related to preparation before a COVID vaccine shot. You don't need to take any medication in advance. Broadly, talk to your doctor if you have a history of severe allergies or other questions, but generally you don't need to take anything in advance. Just make sure you've had plenty of water, and I would eat some breakfast. Good question. Greg K. I heard on the news that pharmacies are wasting vaccine. Why is that happening? Oh, that's a good question. There's actually a lot inside that question. So all of these vaccines were manufactured in a way that was meant to get as many vaccine doses out as quickly and efficiently as possible. So they've all been produced so that there are multiple doses of vaccine in one vial. Because if you think about it, one of the hardest things in terms of actually making a vaccine is not just making the vaccine itself, it's what do you store it in. All of those little vials and all of the work that has to go into making sure they're sterile and secure, and the temperature and all of this. So the vaccines have gone out, the Pfizer, there's about 6 doses of Pfizer in every vial. The Moderna, there were about 10 doses in every vial, and actually to be able to get more out, they increased it to 15. So that's great when you have thousands and thousands of people who are all very excited to get the vaccine. Because if you're doing a mass vaccination site, like at the United Center, we're doing 5,000, 6,000 a day, no problem. You're just gonna, draw all of that vaccine up and you use it all. The issue becomes when you start to see some of this softening of demand. Say I'm an outpatient provider, so I'm more likely to have Moderna, that's the one that doesn't need the ultra cold, or the Johnson & Johnson. And for that Moderna, maybe I've got 1 person, 2 people, 3 people who want a vaccine. The question is, do I go ahead and puncture that vial that has 10 or 15 doses in it? And really the answer at this point is yes. We want to make sure that people are getting that vaccine. But what it means is, especially in more rural areas or just in areas, places don't have these big long lists like we used to, where you could always make sure every single vaccine dose was being used. So compared to even a month ago, where we were working so hard, CDPH was working to make sure every single dose was being used, and we were moving it all around the city. You never wanted to make sure it would go to waste. At this point, particularly in pharmacy settings, there are settings where vaccine is being wasted, and we actually Not that we want vaccine wasted, but we don't want a pharmacy or a pediatrician or a provider saying, you know what, I can't find 15 people to get the vaccine, so I'm not going to open this vial. Instead, we actually have enough vaccine, and we probably will then see some more wastage. It's not that people are doing a bad job, it's just that with the way it's set up. There is discussion happening around eventually being able to have single-dose vaccine vials, but that's the opposite of what we needed early on. So I hope that helps clarify it. How is the John Special on Facebook? How is the uptake on J&J? So it's certainly lower than it was before the pause, but we have hundreds of people getting J&J every day here in Chicago. And it's been interesting because increasingly we've been setting up a choice for people. So I was out, for example, with the vaccine bus over the weekend. We were out in Austin. Let me just give a quick shout out to everybody who worked on that. They worked with CAPS, with the 15th Chicago Police Department out there. They worked with a number of the faith organizations. They worked with a number of the community-based organizations. And there was this block-to-block approach where literally they went and knocked on all the doors, in this surrounding block area. And then we parked the vaccine bus at the park. And then Uncle Remus Chicken, which is a very popular local chicken place, donated 2-piece chickens for anybody who, came to get vaccinated, and they had music and closed off the street and really made an event out of it, and got a lot of folks vaccinated. I was really pleased by that turnout. And when I was talking to folks, they were being asked, did they want to get Pfizer or did they want to get Johnson & Johnson? And we really saw a split in terms of what people want. There are some people who say, I want the Johnson & Johnson because it's one dose and done. That's the biggest thing that we hear. I was talking to one man who said, I've been meaning to get vaccinated. I work a lot, but I didn't have to, my work starts at 6 o'clock tonight and I realized it's here. I can get this done. Give me the Johnson & Johnson. One dose. I just want to be done with it. We also sometimes hear people who are wanting Johnson & Johnson because it is the one that has the lowest rate of side effects. I was talking to, I see patients in clinic myself, and last night I was talking to a patient who had still not made the decision to get vaccinated, and when I was talking to him, his main hesitation was worry about side effects. And so we talked about numbers of side effects, but I also said to him, honestly, for you, I would probably recommend the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it's one dose and done. It has the lowest side effects, and more people who do have the side effects tend to get it after that second dose. But then there are also people who say, I really don't want the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There are people, who were concerned about that pause, even though where we looked at it, the blood clots, the risk of getting blood clot if you get COVID is infinitely higher than the risk if you get the COVID vaccine. Still, it gave people pause, I think particularly younger women. Some said, you know what, this isn't the one I want. Or they say, I want to really make sure I'm getting the vaccine that's got the highest level of protection, even though they all have fantastic protection against the serious outcomes of COVID, I really want to do the 2 doses. So we make them both available, and what we've seen is, there will be some days where the majority of people want J&J. There will be some days where the majority of people want Pfizer. Doesn't matter to me. Really, the main thing is just that folks are choosing to get any of the 3 vaccines. So, so we've been seeing it tick back up and have been working to really make sure it's available. At the United Center, for example, right now, you can get either Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson through the drive-through, and we're seeing some folks who want both. Now, for kids, just to remind you, only Pfizer. So if you're signing up at the United Center, for that drive-through, for example, you'll have to get Pfizer for the children, the 12 to 17-year-olds, because that's the only one that's been authorized for kids. But yeah, that's what we're seeing. Okay, we're coming up on time here. Christina Judge on Facebook is wondering, how do you volunteer to work on the bus? Thank you for your interest. So if you are interested in volunteering, not just necessarily on the bus, but broadly on the COVID response, if you go to chicago.gov/coronavirus, we've got a section for volunteers. CDPH has something called the Medical Reserve Corps, which you can sign up through if you're interested in potentially being part of the COVID response or really any public health response. We certainly take folks who have a medical background. So if if you're a doctor or a nurse or an EMT or a dentist or anybody with a medical background, we'd love to have you. And you go and you put in some information and you check your license. But we also do take people who don't have a medical background, who want to help. There's a ton of work around registering and outreach, et cetera. There's a background check that goes into that. But if you're interested, you can go on the website and sign up. And we have had just hundreds and hundreds of Chicagoans be part of volunteer efforts throughout the COVID response. Okay, I think we are just about at time. So if we didn't get to your question, we'll try to get to it next week. I will just note, just quickly on this, Faith State, I hope we got your question about the United Center. Christina Judge on Facebook is saying, how do you recommend getting the homeless vaccinated? I'd like to give that information to those I come across. So we actually have done the priority for people who are unstably housed at the very beginning. We vaccinated folks through shelters, but also we have funded and made vaccine available for some of the outreach groups that are going to people who you may see on the street. We also, that phone number, frankly, 312-746-4835. I really try to emphasize that number for all situations. We're working to make sure we can bring vaccine to people, and we're being pretty flexible in terms of some of what that means. I know for folks who are homeless, there's usually a number of challenges that are involved there. But if they're connected to any of the shelters or, again, know that we're funding outreach organizations who are working to bring vaccinations to there. And maybe just a last quick one, Jorgensen Yolanda on Facebook. She's just wanting to confirm, 12 and up can go anywhere there is Pfizer once ACIP approves. Sorry if we already answered that. They can. The only thing is that the site has to sort of be willing to do age 12 and up. There may be some medical providers who don't see children who may say, you know what, I don't want to open up to non-patients who don't have kids. But broadly speaking, yes, and anything that we'll be listing on ZocDoc or on the Chicago website, chi.gov/vaccine, through pharmacies, through our sites, anywhere with Pfizer can go down to age 12. There just may be individuals, especially if they don't usually see kids, who may not do it. But we've worked hard so that pharmacies, et cetera, are able to do that. All right, thanks for everybody's questions. In terms of some good news, in addition to my new Twitter account, at Dr. Arwady, please feel free to follow me. I'm learning how to do this. Also, it's National Hospital Week. So May 9 to 15, really, really huge thanks to everybody in the hospital and health systems who have been absolutely critical to the COVID response, who always step up no matter what is going on in our own health. Big, big thank you to everyone who works in hospitals. So. Thank you. We will be back on Thursday, I believe, with Dr. Sybil Madison at 11 a.m., the normal time. In the meantime, please stay safe and get that word out about the vaccine number. We really, the way we get past this is getting everybody vaccinated, and those individual conversations are what change people's minds. Thanks very much. See you on Thursday.